North Sea Energy Programme, we also take a closer look at the next phase. When you have any questions, you can enter them in the chat and the experts will answer them. And today we will discuss the overall legal aspects and the energy hubs design with today's guests, van Nieuwkoop and Rob van Zoelen. We welcome two experts of the North Sea Energy Programme on the table. Van Nieuwkoop, welcome, and Rob van Zoelen. Maybe you can explain your role in the North Sea Energy Programme and the background to your affiliation. Lisa, can I start with you?
Yeah, so I'm currently a PhD researcher at the Groningen Center of Energy Law and Sustainability of the University of Groningen, and my research mainly focuses on offshore system integration, including the offshore energy hubs.
Okay, we will discuss the legal aspects of offshore energy transition with you in this session. Rob, how about you?
My name is Rob van Zoelen. I'm an energy analyst at the New Energy Coalition. And my main role focuses on the hydrogen supply chains, but also the system integration aspect of hydrogen into the energy system.
We will discuss the basic design of the energy hubs with you. Before you have your presentation, why are energy hubs so important in this whole energy transition? Can you give a quick argument to do that?
Yeah, in previous NSC programs we saw that system integration, so combining several energy commodities offshore, has value in terms of space, in terms of money, and we can do that when we look to that in a specific geographical region, and that's why energy hubs are so important.
Yeah. Maybe for the audience who are not so familiar with energy hubs, what is an energy hub actually different from a wind park or a CCS project? When you call it an energy hub?
I come back to it in my presentation, but actually the definition is a search area where multiple energy commodities are coming together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that this is a good moment to go into your presentation. I would like to invite you to present the work that you've done on the design of the hubs.
So let's start with the research about the energy hubs. And as we discussed already on the table, it's good to start with the definition of what we mean with an energy hub, because sometimes there are some different ideas about that. And our definition that we used in the study is that an energy hub is a search area for offshore system integration. So actually it's an area where multiple energy carriers are coming together. And also it's good to explain this relation with system integration. And that's because system integration we define as multiple solutions and combinations of different energy carriers, such as platform electrification, power to gas, or carbon capture and storage, and that are actually the activities that are coming together in such a hub. Then the hub locations. We identified 3 hub locations: hub west, north, and hub east. And these locations are chosen by several factors. One is that these locations involve a lot of offshore wind production. The other reason is that these locations involve existing natural gas infrastructure, and other reasons is that they have interconnection possibilities. But what you can also see is that those hubs are a bit further offshore, and that is also that we saw in previous NSC studies that if we're going further offshore, system integration becomes more relevant. For example, if you want to electrify a natural gas platform further offshore, you need a really long cable to get electricity from. So there it makes sense to, for example, combine it with an offshore wind farm. Then on the lower end of the slide, you see some elements that we focused on in these hubs. That can be seen as hub characteristics. Some relate to the functions of the hubs, so that are which different system integration options there are applied in the hub. The second one relates to the types of structure that are used to combine those energy activities, and there we are mainly focused on offshore platforms and sandy islands. And the mode of transport to connect these hubs to the shore. Could be pipelines, could be electric cables, or it could be existing infrastructure. And the latter thing is how those hubs are connected to shore, but also to each other and to international locations. Then, also as part of our study, we focused on how those future power-to-gas designs could look like. And we focused on a platform and on the island. And together with our partners, we developed designs for these structures based on what is needed in terms of electrolyzer stacks, electrical equipment, and in terms of safety distances on those structures. And also, not the least relevant, is that when you apply system integration, there also are a lot of interdependencies between different actors. So we used the design structure matrix to assess all the actions that are needed to apply system integration in a certain area, and also listed those interdependencies between those actions. And thereby we can conclude that there are a lot of interdependencies, and that's also one of the challenges in realizing those offshore energy hubs. Then the outcomes of the study. So we made those technical designs of those 3 hubs, and thereby we saw how much energy those hubs can produce, and that's significantly. So the 34 gigawatts of offshore wind could deliver actually all the energy supply that electricity supply that we currently have, and also 10% of our molecule supply that we currently have in natural gas, but then in hydrogen form. Also, we developed knowledge on the characterization of the hubs, the timeline in which investments could evolve, and also what interconnection possibilities there are between the hubs. Also, as I discussed already, we designed designs for power-to-gas platforms and islands, and creating an overview of those interdependencies and which actions are needed to overcome them. And the latter relates to the spatial impact of the landfall of all those energy, and I'll come back to that in a later slide. If you go to the Energy Atlas on the website of North Sea Energy, you see how those designs turned out. And in this slide, I want to show how what you can see on such a design and what we did. So here you see the offshore wind parks. You see also that those energy hub is connected with corridors to the land. And you also see that there's an offshore electricity grid that uses the electricity to electrify the CCS platforms in the west. And you also see the new and the reused existing pipelines for the CCS framework that's represented by the purple lines. So that is and if you read the report, you see a lot of technical details on those energy hubs. But what's currently not in the energy hub designs is that we didn't optimize the scale. So, for example, the relation between power to gas and to electricity landfall, and we didn't specify the specific routes that the cables and the pipelines can go to the land. Further, there are also some other innovative technologies, such as offshore hydrogen storage or in-turbine electrolyzers that we can investigate further. So there's still a lot of challenges to go further to, but these initial designs that we made can provide a good discussion starter and provide the right characteristics that are relevant to improve those designs further in next programs. Then the results on the difference between cost of platforms and islands. We see that actually, if you look to the total cost of the power-to-gas platform and islands, mainly the electrolyzers cover the most of the investments, and the structure itself relatively less. Also, you don't see a big difference if you would allocate 4 gigawatts of electrolyzers on 8 platforms or on one single dedicated power-to-gas islands. But those different structures have some other advantages which are relevant when you are going to choose between a platform or island. Such that, for example, the platforms you can cluster them, but you can also have them a bit separate. And if you cluster them you can optimize the space on those platforms, but if you keep them separate, you can optimize the cablings between those platforms. And with islands, an advantage is that you can also allocate other activities more easily on such islands, such as maintenance activities. Then a last but not least important aspect is the landfall of all this electricity. And we investigated also what the impact could be of having 60 gigawatts of energy produced in the future, and what spatial impact there would be on the harbors, which where also the space is limited. Then we see that the spatial impact is quite significant, and this is still the minimum scenario. So here we already assume that part of the electricity is also converted to hydrogen, because if you land it in the form of hydrogen, there's less space involved in the harbors. So that type of considerations are also very relevant for the design of the hubs. And another consideration is that this is only for the spatial uses of the landfall only, so it doesn't even include all the space that is needed, for example, for maintenance activity, but also for decommissioning and recycling of the wind turbines. So this was an overview of the few of the main findings of the study. But Australia also contains a lot of details which can be looked further into in the report that's available on our website.
Okay, Rob, thank you. Please have a seat on the table again. I was wondering, you were discussing the energy corridors, where all the energy is transported either electrically or by hydrogen. But you also discussed the interconnections with the neighboring countries. How does that impact the hub selection and design action?
Yeah, so actually the geographical regions of the hubs are selected such that they have quite good interconnection possibilities. So you see that the hub east is very close to the German offshore wind parks, but north is actually a bit in the middle even of Germany, in Denmark, and also the UK. And hub west is
more central, right?
Central, but also very close to the UK.
Lisa, if you're looking at this, we discussed hub west to more extent. How does it impact the legal aspects of the energy transition? Does it make a difference whether you have a hub or just a project in the North Sea?
Well, if you have a hub, you automatically talk about like cross-border components as well, and then you're talking about different jurisdictions. So, for instance, a wind farm located in one country and a gas or oil platform in another one, and then you're crossing the border, and of course, different legal regimes apply.
Does it make things extremely more complex? Because we do have this case at hand. When Diaz wants to develop a gas platform on one side connected to a wind park in Germany. Specific legal aspects there, sure.
Yeah, definitely. Then the question arises like, how do we qualify that line? Is it a direct line on the international European law, or do we have other legal terms which are like applicable? So it always complicates the question.
Okay, and also bringing different functions together, like CO2 storage, hydrogen production, wind, and maybe still some gas production. Does it also complicate matters in these energy hubs?
Yeah, especially regarding liabilities.
Okay. You did discuss hub west in more detail, but there are also two other hubs, like the hub north and hub east. Are there particular differences in these hubs, or can you elaborate on that?
There are quite a big difference between those hubs. So hub west is mainly typified as one of the hubs where the activity started the earliest, because a lot of natural gas platforms there are stopping earlier than in the other two hubs, and also the wind farms are planned to be in operation earlier than in the other two hubs. And another difference is that, for example, in hub north and hub east you have quite some storage potential in structures underground for hydrogen, and in hub west there's more storage potential for hydrogen in depleted gas fields, and also for CO2. So, for example, CCS was not applied in our designs in hub north and hub east.
Is there also a sort of a sequence in time, or the development in time of the different hubs, or could they be developed in parallel?
There is some sequence in terms that the activities, we see that activities in Hub West are starting the earliest, thereafter Hub East, and thereafter Hub North. But also, they can, in theory, they can be developed at the same time. And there's also a lot of relations between the hubs, for example, some existing pipelines crossing multiple hubs. So,
And in legal terms, for Hub West, it's more or less combining functions which are all in the Dutch sector offshore. For Hub East and Hub North, it's much more the interconnections which may become important. Does that make a difference in legal terms that could delay the development of these hubs? Because you need probably international collaboration or alignment.
Exactly. So if you just talk about like Hub West, for instance, you talk about like the Dutch waters, well, the Dutch exclusive economic zone.
Yes.
So you already know which kind of laws will be applicable, most likely. Whereas if you talk like about the cross-border elements, you always deal with more complex matters as well.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's time to dive a little bit deeper in these legal aspects. Yeah. And you have prepared a presentation of the work that was done in G4 on the legal aspects of these energy hubs. So I'd like to invite you to present the results.
Thank you. Regarding the legal aspect, it's first of all very important to note that the hubs are located in the Dutch exclusive economic zone. And that basically means that the Netherlands has its sovereign rights to explore and exploit the natural resources within like the continental shelf, but also just to use the wind currents and waves to create and generate energy. So that's more from a more international perspective. And then going to the European perspective, there's no European law in place regulating the offshore energy hubs as of yet. However, there is an EU policy framework in place, which is called the EU Strategy for Energy System Integration. And it defines system integration as the planning and operating of the energy system as a whole across multiple energy carriers, infrastructures, and consumption sectors by creating stronger links between them, with the objective of delivering low-carbon, reliable, and resource-efficient energy services at the least possible cost for society. And I'm emphasizing this right now because, of course, we are talking about the hubs, and we first of all need to define whether hubs are part of system integration, how these two concepts are related to each other. The main pillars are to promote renewable and low-carbon fuels, as well as to create a more integrated energy infrastructure. And this is also, applicable in the different North Sea countries. We looked at Germany, we looked at the UK, we looked at Denmark as well as the Netherlands. And they all have their national energy and climate plans. And these plans are also just like, they bridge basically the Paris Agreement targets. So yeah, like I said before, we're talking about different hubs that are located in the Dutch exclusive economic zone, but where there are a lot of cross-border elements. So therefore we looked at Germany, especially for Hub East, Denmark as well for Hub East, and United Kingdom for Hub West. We briefly touched upon this earlier today as well regarding platform electrification. We barely have any practical experience, and therefore we are wondering like, how can we connect? How can we qualify those lines which are connecting a wind farm to an oil or gas platform? The same applies to offshore power and power to gas. There are some pilot projects right now, but there are still a lot of uncertainty how we are actually, like how this is legally embedded. And also just like how we can do to place the electrolyzers on the artificial energy island, which is the case in Denmark, for instance. And talking about carbon capture and storage, there is actually more a broad definition given that all the different countries apply with the EU Directive on Geological Storage. Of course, the UK is not bound by that anymore, but has similar rules in force. What we note is that there more often is an open access regime instead of that just one capturer wants to store the CO2. So we see that there is a shift in the regimes over there. the main outcomes were that there is like an inadequate definition of system integration. We of course talked about platform electrification, and if you electrify a platform, you can also state that maybe is not system integration as such, because we also used gas to generate electricity already. The same applies to carbon capture and storage. If you store the CO2, there's not another corridor involved, and therefore system integration is probably best envisioned in offshore hydrogen production as such. There are a lot of individual sectoral roles right now, rather than one overarching law on system integration, and therefore we conclude that we are looking for like a system integration law at the European level, especially because then we can clearly just overcome all these cross-border elements as well. For instance, the EU policy framework on energy system integration should get a legal basis. We also included on when the projects are expected to take place, and therefore also just to emphasize the importance to hurry up regarding like the legal embeddedness of all these different questions. So that is basically the main outcome of the legal work package.
Okay, Lisa, thank you very much. I had a question actually. You discussed the legal framework and issues around interconnections, around energy hubs, system integration, but also new technologies. Now we have a few new technologies being developed for offshore, the CCS, you elaborated on that, but also the hydrogen development, maybe in the future also energy storage. So how do these relate? Are there differences in the legal framework around these different developments that may hinder the deployment?
Yeah, like I said before as well, that regarding CCS, there is already a legal framework in place, but we are just really hampered by how it would look like in practice. However, when you talk about offshore hydrogen production, there is not yet a legal framework. We are just trying to combine different aspects, and every single country just regulates it differently. Well, it's not regulated as such, but they just find the ways around to make sure that somehow the electrolyzers are also qualified in a certain way.
Okay, so for hydrogen deployment, that the legislation could be a hinder to accelerate in that area.
But also other offshore technologies. Think, for instance, about floating solar, wave and tidal energy.
Okay. Thank you very much, and please have a seat. Earlier we discussed on the development with the energy hubs, the timing of it. Would you think that the development of the energy laws that are needed, and also the cross-border legislation to make it work and to make it possible to develop these offshore integrated hubs, is that in time, or could it be a delay in the whole development? What do you think?
Well, from a legal perspective, of course, steps have definitely been taken. However, it's still lagging behind. The technology is developing faster, and the legislation is just trying to pace up, of course. But right now, it's not really boosting it.
Okay. So to close off on this, what is your main advice from this work to policymakers or to Europe, maybe?
Yeah, a clear definition on energy system integration and also on energy hubs as such, like which technologies could be combined and what does it actually mean. Because then if you have like a clear view on what is covered by the terminology, might be in an act or might be just in the national level as such, then steps can definitely be taken to apply with these norms.
Okay, thank you very much. Rob, you're moving on with North Sea Energy 5. Can you elaborate a little bit on what's planned for the next phase of this North Sea Energy program with respect to the design and development of the energy hubs?
Yeah, so actually in North Sea Energy 5 we're going further with this initial designs. But we're going, as I already thought, there are some things that are not in it yet or can be improved, and we are going further with that. And we do that also in three different stages. So what we also experienced with this design is, for example, that Tata Steel changed its CCS plans, and that offshore wind targets were increased, and then you have to adapt your designs based on that because it's a significant impact. And that's also one thing we want to cover, to be more flexible.
Yeah, And you say also speed up the dissemination route. If I'm correct, we're working with sprints. Can you elaborate a little bit on it in the 3 phases?
Yeah, so we have 3 sprints, and one sprint will cover approximately 9 months. And then after that period, we're going to discuss it with the government, but also with stakeholders. And we see, for example, the aspect that what we discussed about nature, but also with existing assets and which are owned by parties at the moment, how they think about the designs and what are caveats that we probably didn't think about from the research perspective. And so we can improve the hubs every time that we have such a route.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're towards the end of this webinar. Thank you much for your insights on the legal aspects and the design of the energy hubs. All the reports of Energy4 actually can be found on our website, so have a look at all the detailed information that is in our reports. You can also link to our social media link on LinkedIn to get the latest updates of what's going on in the North Sea Energy Program. And I would like to welcome you to the next webinar on the results of North Sea Energy 4.